What's good, ladies and gents? Welcome to the MKO Pugilism Boxing channel, where we talk all things boxing. Remember to like and subscribe. Always hit the bell notification, put it on all so you get notified of the latest content as when it drops. So, without further ado, let's get into this. So, the long anticipated face off, the long anticipated debate between Simon Jordan and Eddie Hearn. Eddie Hearn, as we know, he's had a lot of controversy. We've had fighters leaving Eddie Hearn, and the notable thing that has been on Eddie Hearn's back from last year, October, is CONORBENN, because CONORBENN obviously he failed the VADA drugs test, adverse findings, clomiphene. And there's been a lot of controversy about that because there's two tests. And this was Eddie Hearn's time to sort of face the music. Simon Jordan, I think, had been calling him the coward for not coming on the show and all this business. So this was a time where finally you get both men together and they just have it out. Eddie Hearn gets to make his case to the guy that likes a bit of controversy, likes to sort of speak how he feels and say his piece, and he's loud and he's proud and he's Simon Jordan. So this was anticipated, and as it, I'm just giving you a few of my points here. So as the thing began, Simon Jordan, one of the first things he mentioned, of course, was about the CONORBENN situation. Said that Eddie Hearn went on as if to say he couldn't pull the fight, as if he couldn't pull the CONORBENN versus Chris Eubank Jr. fight. Eddie Hearn sort of protested about that and kind of puts Simon Jordan in his place, because he said that, look, I couldn't do that. You're wrong for saying that. Oh, I should have pulled the fight. Because it technically it comes down to the BBBOC, to the British Boxing Board of Control. It is their responsibility to pull fights. It is not mine as a promoter. It is their responsibility. So he came out, sort of said that from the word go, stood quite strong. One thing that came out very clearly from this dialogue or debate, or whatever you want to call it, was that Simon Jordan cannot stand Eddie Hearn. That came out very, very clearly. And I mean, you could hear that from some of the things where he's always bigging up Tyson Fury, and it's almost as if Tyson Fury can barely do any wrong in his eyes. But in this interview, from his tone, from everything about him, everything he said, it had venom in it. He really cannot stand Eddie Hearn. There's just something about Eddie Hearn that just riles him up. He just doesn't like him. And as the Beats channel, Boxing Beats and Rhymes, his channel, he also pointed out something that was very key in this whole discussion and this whole CONORBENN saga, which is that when the board came out with their statement as to, this fight is now prohibited, it cannot take place between CONORBENN and Chris Eubank Jr., they cancelled the fight. When they came out with that, they didn't actually mention CONORBENN failing the VADA test in their statement. They didn't mention it. They said this is prohibited. It's not in the interest of boxing for this fight to go ahead. But they did not mention the failed test by CONORBENN as the reason for the cancellation of the fight. And that's one thing, Beats definitely pointed that out. And I think at the time, other people recognized it too, but that's where, yesterday I was sort of looking into that. And I believe this is because they didn't mention the VADA failed test, because the BBBOC, British Boxing Board of Control, they only recognize UCAT. And the Billy Joe Saunders situation is another example of this, where the board were happy with him fighting Andrade. And that's because they, according to UCAD, that nasal spray that Billy Joe Saunders took was out of competition, so it's okay. And the reason, back in those days when Saunders was going to fight Andrade, the reason it didn't happen is not because VADA were not happy with that nasal spray, and there's a conflict between the rules. Whereas the UK anti-doping agency are happy for you to take certain things out of competition, VADA were like, no, you can't take it at all, and that's why that fight got pulled. So there is kind of a conflict between the rules of VADA and the rules of UCAT. And yeah, that's again why I think in the statement they didn't mention CONORBENN's failed test, because he failed with that adverse finding, but it wasn't with their company, UK Anti-Doping Agency. It was with VADA, who they don't recognize. So Simon Jordan also, he in this interview, he did this dialogue, he did show quite a lot of ignorance, particularly on that point, as he stated that no, Eddie, the board does recognize VADA. They do recognize adverse findings in VADA, and Eddie Hearn was like, no, they don't. And in that point, Eddie was 100% correct, because they don't. And you look at the statement as to why the fight was pulled, and that further proves the point that no, if they didn't even mention it, how can you now say they recognize it? And, we know, as I said, that just the Saunders fight is one example. Dillian White fight back in the days is another example. And, there you go. And then throughout this process, there was a lot of insults thrown back and forth, mainly sort of by Simon Jordan. He called Eddie Hearn manipulative. He called him a snake oil salesman. He was very, very sort of aggressive, and you could tell that, he was adversarial. He was really looking to get at Eddie Hearn and to sort of humiliate him in a way. And he didn't like it when it happened in reverse, because Eddie Hearn, yeah, he took the insults, but he retorted by saying something factual about Simon Jordan. And he said, you go on as if you're this great businessman and you're this great mind, but you're a walking contradiction, and you're a hypocrite, because you're the same one who lost your £75 million. You're the same one who went bankrupt and lost your football club. Simon Jordan did try to what do you call it? He did try to save face. He did say, well, no, I'd have to make the millions in order to lose them, that's true, that's fair enough. And he tried to say, don't say things that'll get you in trouble, Eddie. Be careful what you're saying about me, sort of thing. So he didn't like it when the facts came against him. And Hearn said, okay, I apologize if you didn't go bankrupt. And he said, so explain it. What did happen? And Jordan went on to pretty much say the same thing, as something along the lines of, he said, well, no, it went into default, or something of that nature. So he just said, well, I could no longer fund it anymore. So I had to go to the biggest creditor, let it go into default, lose 50 million and leave with 50 million. So essentially, it went into default anyway. He could no longer manage it. So he kind of more or less conceded it, although he denied what Eddie Hearn said. Essentially, he did lose the club, he did lose the money. So it's not really a sort of positive thing there that he can say. And, Hearn come out, he admitted, the other host, Jim, said, do you really wanted to slap Simon? And Hearn said, yeah, I did want to slap him for what he said. I didn't want to come on the show. I was angry about what he said, and I did want to slap him. I didn't want to go on his show. He tries to manipulate things and make it similar to what Jordan was accusing Hearn of. Hearn was sort of throwing it back to him, saying, nah, you try and make everyone see it in your way, etc., etc. And, sort of slung it back in his face. And, Simon admitted one thing that was key about this whole dialogue was sometimes where they kind of agreed on things. And one of those times was when, going back to sort of the CONORBENN situation, Simon Jordan actually admitted when he was cornered by Eddie Hearn that contractually and legally he had no choice but to allow the board to make the decision about the sort of CONORBENN Chris Eubank fight. So whereas Simon Jordan towards the beginning was saying, well, no, you could have pulled it, you could have done what's morally right, blah, blah, blah. When he was cornered and Hearn sort of pinned him down on his point, he said, Simon, do you admit, was I contractually and legally, did I have no choice but to allow the board to make the decision, because they're the body that's over boxing, I'm a promoter. And even Jordan did concede that point. And although it did contradict some of the other things Simon Jordan said. And this was quite a long dialogue. I mean, this went on for I think 90 minutes. So I can't quite cover everything. But I think both guys made some good points. I think what Simon Jordan said is gonna, sort of ring true with people who definitely still see Ben's guilt and this sort of thing, and people who don't like Eddie Hearn, they're going to definitely side with Simon Jordan. So I think that's going to stay the same. And I think for Eddie Hearn, he did acquit himself quite well in this. I wouldn't say come out of this unscathed, but he acquitted himself quite well. And that was particularly because of the two guys. The one that was coming with more knowledge and facts throughout this interview was Eddie Hearn. He was the one that was sort of taking emotion out of the picture and just being quite objective and straightforward, and he was just defending himself. Whereas Simon Jordan came across as being sort of more aggressive, ad hominem attacks and personal attacks and things of that nature. He was the one that was aggressive and sort of, it's his character, I suppose. But of the two of them, one guy was a bit more mature and in control of himself, and that was Eddie Hearn, whereas Simon Jordan was just himself. He was a bit more aggressive, and he wasn't really coming with facts like Eddie Hearn did. Eddie Hearn came with more the facts and left the emotion out. So in that sense, he come out on top. But if for people who sort of like Simon Jordan and what he says, he may come out on top for you. And Simon also, he didn't stop with he wasn't satisfied with just sort of going after Eddie Hearn. He was also dissing Anthony Joshua. And it's weird because he always seems to have this attitude where he's dead against Anthony Joshua. And it's like, Anthony Joshua is a guy that former unified champion. He's not the best in the world, to me at least, as we speak now. But yeah, he's a very, very good fighter. Does fight anybody. And he's not messing about with contracts like Tyson Fury. But he just seems to have this thing against AJ. And he said, AJ is just a flat track bully. He only wins against inferior competition. And, all these sort of ad hominem personals against AJ. And I find that kind of sad. Because if you like boxing, what has Anthony Joshua done? I mean, you may not think he's the best. You may not like his style or whatever. But what has he really done to upset you like that? It's kind of weird. But yeah, he had these unsavory remarks about Anthony Joshua, but in the end it may have worked in Eddie Hearn's favor, because they did end up towards the end stages of the dialogue talking about Anthony Joshua versus Jermaine Franklin, which is going to take place on the 1st of April. So in that regard, that's a little W for Eddie Hearn there, because he's got the timing just right, as Beat said in his video. And he got to talk about his premier fighter, which is Anthony Joshua. So that's probably a good thing for Eddie Hearn. But anyway, let me know what you thought about that dialogue. And until next time, it's MKO Pugilism, over and out.